It began in the darkness of a French field in 1944. A handful of American soldiers crouched beside what appeared to be a full line of Sherman tanks. But these machines didn't roar to life. They hissed. In the still night air, the men connected air hoses and began inflating the tanks like giant balloons. Behind them, a half-track rumbled into position carrying enormous loudspeakers, each one ready to project the thunder of an armored division moving across open ground. Miles away, German scouts listened carefully, believing thousands of American troops were preparing for a major assault. In reality, only a small team of 1,100 men stood on that empty field. Their mission was to deceive an entire army. This was the true story of the Ghost Army. The Ghost Army officially began as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, a top-secret American unit designed for one purpose: to mislead German intelligence. By the summer of 1944, the Allies were pushing through France but faced a significant problem. The Germans were skilled at reading troop movements, tracking radio signals, and analyzing battlefield patterns. Every time a major unit moved, German intelligence noticed and reacted. The U.S. Army needed a way to confuse that process. They needed a unit that didn't fight like a traditional army. They needed a team that could steal the identity of other divisions, create fake battlefields, and manipulate the enemy's expectations. The idea was bold, risky, and unlike anything ever attempted in American military history. The creation of the Ghost Army combined military strategy with a surprising source of talent: American art schools, advertising agencies, and technical workshops. The Army recruited painters, illustrators, industrial designers, sound engineers, set builders, and radio operators. Many of them had no combat experience at all, but they understood illusion. They understood how lighting, shapes, shadows, and sound could trick the human mind. Their skills were exactly what the Army needed. Men like Bill Blass, who later became a world-famous fashion designer, and Ellsworth Kelly, who became one of America's most influential modern artists, served in this unusual unit. They were joined by engineers and technicians capable of building the tools needed for an entirely new kind of warfare, one that relied more on creativity and misdirection than firepower. The core of the Ghost Army's deception rested on three pillars: visual illusions, audio warfare, and radio mimicry. The first pillar, visual deception, required the most dramatic equipment. Instead of heavy tanks and artillery, the unit deployed inflatable rubber replicas. These full-size tanks could be lifted by just a few men and inflated in minutes. At a distance, especially from the air, they looked real. They had the correct shape, dimensions, and shadows. The team also used inflatable jeeps, trucks, and artillery pieces. They arranged them in believable formations, complete with fake tire tracks carved into the dirt. German reconnaissance aircraft flying overhead routinely photographed these positions and reported them as legitimate armored units. The illusion extended beyond vehicles. The Ghost Army built entire camps from scratch. They erected fake tents, fake command posts, and even fake supply depots. Soldiers wore the patches and insignias of divisions they were impersonating. They painted misleading markings on their trucks to sell the identity of a unit that wasn't actually present. They created the impression of activity by staging fake maintenance operations, pretending to repair non-existent tanks, and setting up laundry lines that suggested hundreds of men were living in the area. Everything was designed to look authentic from a distance, and because the Germans were often forced to rely on quick aerial reconnaissance, these illusions frequently succeeded. The second pillar of the Ghost Army's strategy was audio deception, one of the most innovative technologies of the war. The Army recorded real tank divisions at Fort Knox, capturing every mechanical detail, from engines roaring to tracks grinding through mud. These recordings were pressed onto large discs and played through enormous speakers mounted on half-tracks. Each speaker weighed hundreds of pounds and could project sound as far as 15 miles under the right conditions. Engineers carefully layered audio tracks to simulate the movement of entire units: a tank column shifting into position, trucks arriving with supplies, engineers constructing bridges, even simple background sounds of men working. Everything was meticulously planned. If the Germans were listening, the audio needed to match what they expected from real troop movements. The sound crews coordinated their recordings with the visual displays on the ground. If inflatables were placed to represent a tank division, the sound team created audio to match it. They even timed movements to match German habits of patrol and observation. When played correctly, these soundscapes could convince enemy scouts that a large formation was preparing for battle or reinforcing a key position. German soldiers who heard the noises often reported movements that never actually happened. The Ghost Army used that confusion to their advantage, allowing real units to maneuver with reduced risk of detection. The third pillar was radio deception. German intelligence was excellent at monitoring Allied radio traffic. They studied the communication patterns of American divisions, noting everything from message timing to the habits of individual radio operators. Every division had its own radio fingerprint. The Ghost Army created a team of highly skilled signal operators who learned how to copy those fingerprints. They studied actual units to replicate their phrasing, message length, and communication rhythms. By broadcasting fake messages that mimicked real divisions, they convinced the Germans that those divisions were located in places where they weren't. This kind of misdirection played a crucial role in confusing the German high command. By late 1944, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops had become a fully developed deception force, equipped with inflatable armor, powerful sound systems, and radio teams capable of imitating entire divisions. They were ready to enter combat zones, not as frontline fighters, but as illusionists playing on the grandest stage imaginable. Their job was to draw German attention, pull forces away from critical areas, and create the impression of strength where there was none. The next phase of their mission would take them into the heart of Europe, where they would execute some of the most daring and creative deception operations of the entire war. The Ghost Army began its first major missions in France during the summer of 1944. Their early test came in the Brittany region, where the Allies needed to keep German forces guessing about the location of advancing armored units. The Ghost Army impersonated the 6th Armored Division, setting up inflatable tanks, fake artillery positions, and a series of radio broadcasts that matched the division's communication style. They placed their display close enough to the front lines that German scouts could observe the buildup. When the audio trucks began playing the movements of heavy armor and support vehicles, German intelligence concluded that a large armored force had arrived. As a result, they redirected their defensive focus, buying time for the real 6th Armored Division to maneuver elsewhere. It was an early success, proving that the Ghost Army's methods could change the course of battlefield decisions. Their operations grew more ambitious as the Allies pushed deeper into France. One of the most important missions took place near the city of Metz. At this stage of the war, General Patton's Third Army was making rapid strides, but still faced strong German resistance. The Ghost Army was tasked with creating the illusion of a major buildup on the outskirts of the city. Inflatable tanks were moved into open areas, arranged in formations that matched typical armored staging grounds. Radio teams sent out messages imitating real units, preparing for combat. The sound crews set up speakers that projected the noises of engines, troops, and heavy equipment assembling for a major operation. German forces, listening closely to Allied communication patterns and monitoring any signs of movement, interpreted the display as evidence that Patton had more troops in the area than he actually did. This caused German commanders to delay counterattacks and adjust their defensive lines, giving Patton the advantage he needed. As the weather turned cold and the winter of 1944 settled in, the Ghost Army found themselves near one of the most dangerous areas of the entire war, the region surrounding the Battle of the Bulge. The German offensive in the Ardennes had caught many Allied units off guard, and the front lines shifted rapidly. The Ghost Army was assigned to reinforce weak points by creating fake divisions to fill gaps in the defensive perimeter. This put them closer to enemy lines than ever before. In some locations, they were only a few miles from German patrols. While setting up inflatables and running sound operations, they risked drawing actual enemy fire. They weren't armed or prepared for direct combat. Their purpose was deception, not fighting, but the danger was real. Even so, they continued their work, staging convincing displays that suggested the arrival of reinforcements where none existed. Their presence slowed German advances and helped stabilize exposed sections of the Allied front. One of the most impressive missions of the Ghost Army unfolded in March 1945 during the approach to the Rhine River. Crossing the Rhine was one of the largest and most important Allied operations in the final months of the war. The real crossing was planned for a specific location, and secrecy was critical. The Ghost Army created a fully simulated buildup miles away from the true crossing point. They inflated hundreds of dummy vehicles, including tanks, trucks, and artillery positions. They arranged them to look like staging areas for a massive river assault. The sound teams played recordings of engineers constructing bridges, heavy trucks arriving with supplies, and tanks shifting into position. Radio signals mimicked units preparing for a major offensive. German reconnaissance flights observed the activity and reported the fake buildup as authentic. German commanders moved additional forces to defend this false crossing site, weakening their presence at the real location. When Allied troops finally crossed the Rhine, they encountered far less resistance than expected. Historians believe the Ghost Army's deception saved many lives by drawing German forces away at a critical moment. After the Rhine operation, the Ghost Army continued supporting Allied movements across Germany. They executed smaller deception missions to confuse retreating German forces and help protect advancing units. Their work remained dangerous, especially as German resistance became increasingly unpredictable. Yet, despite the risks, the unit suffered relatively few casualties. Their success came not from superior firepower, but from creativity, planning, and a willingness to take unconventional risks on the battlefield. When the war in Europe ended in May 1945, the men of the Ghost Army quietly returned home. They didn't receive a public celebration. They weren't allowed to talk about the missions they had carried out. Their entire existence remained classified. Families assumed they were part of standard engineering or signal units. Friends believed they did typical support work. For the veterans themselves, the silence was difficult. Many felt their contributions had been forgotten because no one knew they existed. The truth about the Ghost Army stayed hidden for more than 50 years. It wasn't until 1996 that the U.S. Army finally declassified the records and revealed what the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops had accomplished. Historians began piecing together the unit's operations, analyzing mission logs, photographs, and after-action reports. Veterans were finally able to speak openly about what they had done and explain how their illusions helped shape the battlefield. They described inflating tanks at night while listening for enemy patrols, broadcasting the sounds of armor across miles of farmland, and copying radio signatures with such precision that German intelligence never suspected the truth. The public reaction was immediate fascination. People were stunned that such a unit had existed and that so much of their work had remained a secret for so long. The legacy of the Ghost Army extends far beyond World War II. Modern military doctrine includes principles of electronic warfare, psychological operations, and tactical deception, many of which trace their roots back to the methods developed by this small group of artists and engineers. Their success proved that creativity could be just as powerful as brute force, and that misdirection on the battlefield could save lives. In 2022, the U.S. Congress awarded the Ghost Army the Congressional Gold Medal, officially recognizing their extraordinary service and the impact they had on the Allied victory. For decades, the achievements of this 1,100-man unit were hidden in sealed files, but their story now stands as one of the most remarkable examples of ingenuity in military history. They fought a different kind of war, using imagination, skill, and deception to defeat an enemy that relied heavily on intelligence and observation. Their work changed the course of battles, protected Allied soldiers, and helped hasten the end of the war. The Ghost Army proved that sometimes the most effective weapon is not the one that fires, but the one that convinces the enemy to look in the wrong direction. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed learning something new today, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling us what you thought of this story.